This tutorial will discuss one of the most important tools in the raster toolset, Raster Calculator. Since Raster Calculator can do so much, I think the best way to go about this is to dive right in. Map Algebra, Raster Calculator. It's a funky design, and let me caution you, you should, as much as possible, click on these, use the statements over here, and click on these numbers and operators, as this can be a very, very finicky tool. So Raster Calculator is difficult to pin down. You can essentially do whatever you want with your raster values, right? We discussed land use raster. It has these string qualifiers so that they can help us understand, but civic institution is not actually civic institution. It's 7, right? And thus it has a value of 7, right? Commercial has a value of 4. And so if I just wanted to think purely mathematically about it, why not just use this like a calculator? For the record, I'm not doing anything worth any kind of value here. I wouldn't use this for anything, but I'm taking the land use raster and I'm multiplying it by 4. Translate this to English, it says take every value in the land use raster and multiply it by 4. Right, and what you get are multiples of 4. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, and so on. Let's do something that's somewhat more practical. It can also be used to query. Now, this is one of its most common uses. Let's say, remember earlier I used a reclassify to do this, but let's say I want land use to equal. Whenever you use this, a Boolean operator requires a double equal sign. That's why it's important to click. This means does not equal. This means and this means or. I just want instances in which land use raster equals, oh goodness, now I've forgotten the value. Residential is 1, right? So where land use value equals 1. Translate this to, if land use raster equals 1, return a value of 1, or true. If it does not, return a value of false. And what comes back, as I mentioned, is 1s and 0s. Remember to keep in mind, if you don't remind yourself what these are, it can be easy to just look at them as a series of 1s and 0s, but this is residential and this is everything else. Pretty cool. I'm free to do this with multiple layers, or the same layer multiple times. Once you start introducing multiple layers, however, you have to make sure that you bracket each of your statements. So land use raster can equal 1, which was residential, or, and I'm saying that's one possibility, or another one, it could equal, let's say, vacant, so 2. Or land use equals 2. All right, so translate, if the cell in land use raster equals 1, which we know to mean residential, or if the cell in land use raster equals 2, which we know to mean vacant, return a value of 1, meaning true. If neither of these statements are true, return a 0, meaning false. All right, somewhat a little different from what we just produced. Oh, computer's having a fritz, isn't it? There we go. All right, we can see a little bit more on the blue, right? Maybe right down here, because I've now allowed vacant to be a participant. So we can also use it on floats. I've taken elevation in here, and let's say I'm only interested in elevation that is less than 200. And I can use that number 200 here because the elevation values are different, right? And that 200 means feet. It actually means something numerical. Whereas when I was querying land use raster, I was querying numbers, value of 4, which really stood for commercial. But in this instance, I'm really saying if elevation is less than 200, return to me a 1 meaning true or a 0 meaning false. And there we go. Anything in green is an elevation under 200. Anything else is is over. So now I have this thing where I've created residential and vacant land, right? And I've also happened to create elevation under 200, which is the 1, and over, which is the 0. Let me remind myself again and follow my own habits. Yeah, ugh. Screw it. No, that's under 200 feet. This is over 200 feet. To remind me, and then this was... Okay, so here where I was, I have one layer, right, of residential or vacant land. I'm going to just take this, change it to no color so we can see it laying on top. And underneath it, I've got a 0 or a gray meaning over 200 feet and a 1 meaning under 200 feet. So let's say I actually wanted, now that I have 2 different layers telling me 2 different things, I wanted to bring back only those areas where it was residential or vacant land and it happened to be under 200 feet. Just as there are many ways to solve any problem logically, there are many ways to use Raster Calculator to do this. I could do a simple arithmetic, right? If res-vac, 0 means anything else, and 1 is categorically meaning residential or vacant land, if I happen to add that to elevation under 200, I'd only get numbers back of 0, right? Ones where neither is true, 1, instances in where 1 is true, or a 2, right? Any of those cells that have a value of 1 here, meaning residential or vacant, and a value of 1 here, meaning under 200 feet, would return with a value of 2, which really means both of these things are true. And look at that. Those are the areas in which both happen to be true. I could take a Boolean approach if I wanted to. And I could say where residential and vacancy equals 1, right? And whenever you're querying between 2 different layers, and is what you use. And elevation under 200 is also 1. So the answer will be different, right? In this instance, it gave us a scale. 0 meant none are true, 1 meant, well, one of the other, and 2 meant both. In this instance, because we're using our Boolean operators, equals, oops, didn't follow my own talk there, we're going to get back a 0 and a 1. But remember, 0 simply means this expression is false, and 1 means this expression is true. And if I jump back and forth, you'll see that the green and, whoops, now I'll do it, and the red are right on top of each other. I've answered the same question with different methods. Perhaps I didn't even need to use any of these layers at all. I could use that same methodology right from the start. Right, I want areas in which, double bracketing here, land use equals 1, or land use equals 2. If you remember from earlier, 1 was residential, 2 was vacant. It follows the same processes as traditional math here. It does what's in brackets first. And, right, I'm outside of the main bracket, now I'm setting up my other one. Elevation is less than or equal to 200. And I'll put on Boolean and arithmetic right below. And as you see, the greens are lining up exactly. So Raster Calculator we reviewed can be used to divide things, multiply, minus, add. You can test Boolean and logical operations. Does this equal this? You could even set instances, right, in which one thing equals another. Is there anywhere where elevation, the value from elevation, equals the value from housing price? Now this would be ridiculous. You wouldn't actually be showing yourself anything interesting about the land, just those very weird places where an elevation in feet is the exact same as a housing price in price per square foot. But the possibilities are endless with Raster Calculator, and as such we will return to it subsequently in future tutorials.